You have to think about them. The key to customer service is you have to think about the customer's needs. That's empathy. Thinking about their feelings and their needs, that's the definition of empathy. And you have to do it, and you have to sound authentic, and you have to sound natural. So if somebody calls you, or if you're calling, Cox or the electricity provider in your area, or you're calling anybody because you're having a problem, if you're calling Verizon, if you're calling anybody, what's the key to a successful conversation that you've ever had when you've been on the receiving end, when you've had to call somebody? Tech support, that could drive anybody crazy, right? Empathy. So the very first thing somebody has to do, and the very first thing you have to do, is you've got to demonstrate that you care about that person's needs. Not that you're trying to defend yourself, not that you're trying to explain it to them, not that you're trying to be logical and analytical, not that you're trying to get off the phone as soon as possible, no matter how normal that would be. You have to position yourself so that you can be calm, be really present, and every word you speak needs to be about their needs. Because that is, in fact, the fastest way to get them to be happy with you and their product, pay for their product or service, and then get off the phone and leave you in peace. It really works.
That's wonderful. Really paying attention. I like that. See, I hope everyone's listening. Now, I know that you developed the 6-part conversation for sales, which is based on your 6-part conversation, so that everyone who wants to have bigger and better business results can do so. Would you be willing to walk us through this?
Absolutely, and I'm going to have Fred put it up on the screen. Beautiful. So the first part is self-empathy, just as it is with the normal 6-part. So you've got to calm yourself down before you even think of listening to somebody's complaints. And customer service is all about the customer's complaints, obviously. So when I think about picking up the phone, whatever kind of a business you're in, so you may be an event company, you may be in some other creative area, you may be somebody who's in high tech, whatever that might be. You might be in sales for any kind of a tech company, Silicon Valley, etc. You might be doing something like photography. You might be a physician's assistant, or you might be the physician itself, or an attorney. It doesn't matter. Whatever they're complaining about, you have to be completely present and peaceful. So I'm feeling, and this is all silent, I'm feeling really anxious because my boss needs them to pay their bill. Breathe. I'm feeling really worried because I need this to be successful so that I can tell my boss that it was successful. Breathe. I'm feeling really concerned because I've done some sort of a business with these people before, and this time I need to make sure that we get paid and that they love the product. Breathe. And you continue with that until the customer has a different approach from you, when you can actually be present and you can actually listen. Now, the second part, which you'll see on the screen, is rapport. Rapport and qualify. So if you're going to create a rapport with that person, it has to be an authentic rapport, and we'll go into this a little bit later. But it is the same as empathy in the normal 6-part conversation, but rapport and qualify in sales means you find out about that person, you qualify that person by finessing for information, not by asking, obviously you're not going to say, hey, can you really pay for a $3 million event? Of course not. But you can finesse, tell me about the last event you did that was a very, very large event. If you tell me about the success, tell me about the purpose, what was the goal you had in mind, how close you came to the goal. They're going to start talking about that event, and in a very short period of time, you're going to figure out if they did it at the Venetian in Las Vegas, if it was a 3-day event, if 500 people attended, you can do the math. You don't need them to tell you that, okay? So it's really important. And then look at the other parts on the screen, and we're going to be dealing with them step by step a little bit later.
Very nice. Now, when someone is attempting to create rapport with someone, what are the key ways to really speed up the process?
Well, the reason that women traditionally do so much better at this is because they are more connecting naturally. You know, for women to have survived and their children to have survived in the millennia that humans have been on the planet, women had to be able to get support and cooperation from other women more than other men. Because if you get cooperation from a man who's not your mate, then you might have a lot of jealousy and somebody gets murdered back in the caves. But getting cooperation from the other women works in every possible way. So being warm, being very connecting, and really listening for what is important to that other person, as well as doing as much research as you possibly can. So if you're doing customer service for a big company, then you're going to have lots and lots of information online. You'll be able to check. You'll find out what they bought, what did they pay for it, when did they buy it, what did they bought from you before, and that gives you plenty of information to be able to say, you know, Bob, I can hear that you're really disappointed because you bought our X95 6 months ago and you really liked it. And then just a month ago, you upgraded to the X97. And from what I'm hearing, you're having some complications with it. Is that right? Now, this guy is not going to be fighting with you because he already feels that you have some level of understanding. He may get a little hot under the collar. He said, but you don't understand. The X95 was fantastic and this is a piece of junk. Okay, he might say that. You've got to listen. You've got to calm yourself. The fact that you have the research in front of you, the fact that you're talking about it will make this conversation go much smoother and much faster.
Now I can understand the connection there. It's very necessary. And with rapport, what is one of the big challenges that people do have, and how can they improve their results?
Well, the big thing about rapport, if you're in sales, you really have to be a talented actor or actress. So you have to seem interested. If somebody has nothing in common with you, if you look at their profile and they have nothing in common with you, the onus is on you to find something that you can relate to. That's very tricky. And again, in customer service, these are not people who are calling to be your new best friend. They're people who are calling because they have a problem with a product or service, or they're not sure if they want to purchase a product or service, or they want to return the product or get a refund on their service. So it's really, really incumbent upon you to work hard to get as much information online and by finessing for information that you possibly can. So Jane, tell me, how did you enjoy the X95? Because I know that you bought it 6 months ago and we don't have any record of any call from you. So I imagine that it was very satisfactory. Is that right? So that's finessing for information. And that's the best way to get the information that you don't already have. And it is golden when you try to have a conversation with somebody about keeping the product, paying for the product, etc.
Nice. They feel so welcome. They want to pay you, right?
That's the point.
Now, where must an account executive or a creative or a salesperson focus when developing their presentation part 3?
Thank you. Presentation is all about the needs of the listener. It's all about the person that you want to sell. I have had so many clients in certain industries, in real estate and in event planning, more than just about any other areas, just because they're very interesting and there are aspects of my life that made it a perfect match. What is really the key here is you have to care enough about the potential client. You really have to truly care enough to do your research. So for example, if an event company, as one said to me some time ago, we really want to sell such and such. We haven't been able to get them to ask for an RFP, request for a proposal. I'm like, well, what is that? Yes. And it's very, very crucial that you take the time and go to their website. If you don't go to their website, if you don't look at what their company is about, if you don't know where the home office is, and maybe it's not in the town where you're trying to pitch, if you don't know how many more or less executives they have and employees they have, if you don't know that they've got a huge charitable thing going on, which is what happened when I was working with one of these companies, not in California, and they were very interested in a company and they hadn't had the time or hadn't taken the time to do enough research. And I found things on there that changed their entire pitch. And so it isn't that they were lazy, they're very hardworking. They just didn't realize how research changes the presentation. And frankly, the research you do should change the presentation at least 30% from one person to the next. Because that's how different customers and clients can be.
A very important part of everything. Now, could you give us an example of what works best in a presentation from any of your corporate clients?
Andrea Michaels is one of the most well-respected and well-loved event professionals in the world. She owns Extraordinary Events in Los Angeles. She gives brilliant presentations. First of all, she knows 10 times more than anybody in the room about anything she's talking about. Secondly, if there's something she doesn't know, she of course says, I'll get you that information. This is a question either that we haven't researched yet, or I have a feeling the prices may have changed, or whatever the words are she's going to use. It doesn't diminish from the respect she gets. It retains the respect she gets. Of course, the event industry, she's extraordinarily creative, unbelievably creative. And she has a fantastic way of creating rapport with people because she genuinely cares about them. She's not faking any of this. She genuinely cares about them. And that's why she has been so successful for decade after decade after decade. And she does some of the most extraordinary events in the world. Now, anybody can enhance their own abilities based on what I just said. If you haven't been in industry for 30 years, okay, you just have to work harder. When I used to do a lot of radio interviews, in the very beginning when I started this company 17 years ago, I had to work like a dog to be prepared for the questions they were going to ask me. And I had to prepare, and I had to print everything out, and I had to have it in front of me at 5 in the morning, and that was the way I had to do it. But after you've done something for some time, you will have memorized it again and again, so now it just comes naturally. So feel free to wake me up at 5 in the morning with a phone call, and I can go into this, and I'll sound exactly the same way as I do right now. So that's the key. How prepared are you? And we certainly saw what happened in last night's presidential debate. There is no question that being 100 times more prepared than anybody else is a great idea. So whatever your politics are, forget about that. We're talking about preparation for a presentation, and it really makes a difference.
The proof was in the pudding, as you referred to last night.
Yes.
Great example.
Yes.
Now, when we need to motivate and inspire a customer and their issue is financial, how can that be accomplished?
What somebody spends on your products or services is commensurate with the benefits you've convinced them they're going to get. So we don't do features anymore. We don't talk about features anymore. We talk about benefits. So if you were selling them a widget, some IT thing that you are convinced they really need, you may be working for the company that produces the widgets. You may be the best friend of the man or woman who invented the widget. But if you're on the phone and trying to make 50 sales calls a day, you still have to figure out what's in it for the person on the other end of the phone. And if you can truly streamline or revolutionize or transform some aspect of their business, then they're going to find the money once you convince them to. Now, it also helps if it doesn't take you 3 months to figure out how to use something like Infusion software. Because Infusion software is an example. I've had a bunch of clients, different industries, who've used it, and the startup aspect of learning it and finding somebody in the office to learn it can be a nightmare. But when you convince them, based on the benefits to them, and you may have to repeat it and repeat it, you may have to reassure them, you may have to call them, you may have to send somebody to do IT work with them, whatever it is, then it is not about the financials at all. As I remember from the Landmark Forum a long time ago, the statement was, if you needed enough money to bury your mother, you'd find it, wouldn't you? So that means when you take away the optional aspect of benefits, there are benefits in your goods, there are benefits in your products, there are benefits in your services, and your job is to craft a presentation that's so clear about those benefits that people are actually going to go out and find the money. And I tell you this because people have gone out to find the money to pay for my services. And that was because they knew they needed it, they knew that they needed to get these results, and they got them. You can do it too.
Very inspiring. Now, on the part 4 is hearing objections. How is it best to deal with the customer or client who is upset because they want bigger and faster results?
Well, first of all, when you're hearing objections, that's really more empathy. You can't jump in. You can't disagree. You can't explain. You can't defend. So you may be somebody who's very logical and analytical, what we would call the upper left brain from Herrmann Brain Dominance Map. And Fred, if you have a moment to put that up, I think people would really love it if you could. So upper left brain, logical and analytical. You being logical and analytical when your client or potential client has objections isn't going to get you anywhere. I know, it's a shock, but it doesn't. If you are a very lower left brain, explaining and defending to try to get safety isn't going to help you at all. It's just going to feel to them as if you're not listening. That's the problem with both of those. You're not listening, they're telling you they have a problem. They want you to hear them. They want you to empathize. Now, if you're very lower right brain, you may get hot under the collar. Well, don't you understand? No, they don't understand. It's your job to understand. You're the seller, they're the buyer. As my uncle said many, many, many decades ago, the guy was a genius and a multimillionaire. He said, it's much easier to be a buyer than a seller. And he had a very, very successful retail store, so he knew this, right? And the last and final thing that doesn't work is just disconnecting. Stonewalling, disconnecting. Now, sometimes people say, let me get my supervisor for you. Probably my supervisor will be able to help you in ways that I can't. Now, that's empathy, and that's really helpful, and that's part of rapport. However, I've had someone hang up on me when I was calling about some, I don't know, phone or tech thing. I have had people say, I'll get my supervisor. Now, you may have been saying to them 10 minutes earlier, get me a supervisor, please. Or you may have been saying to the automated options, supervisor, supervisor, and so all they have to do is be nice about it. But if they haven't been properly trained in customer service, and you and I know that most people in customer service appear to have had little or no training, then you want to be sure that you learn this, because for your business, for your career, for your job, for your life, you want to be able to do this.
Boy, we've all had those buttons pushed.
Supervisor! I just did that this week with somebody. Yeah.
Or I'll connect you to somebody. That somebody will connect you to somebody else. Now, okay, moving forward, once in a while, I know that every company has the great complainer, and no one in customer service actually wants to deal with them. Which actually should a person do? And how do we handle that? And does it matter if the complainer is a man or a woman?
The only thing that you can do when somebody's in pain, and this is another example of somebody in pain. Now, in an intimate relationship, they're complaining about you, right? So thank your lucky stars that they're not complaining about you most of the time in business. They're complaining about your boss, the company, the product, the service, whatever. 99% of the time in business, they're not complaining about you. So that makes it a lot easier. However, these are very unhappy people. These are frustrated, unhappy people, and the sooner you empathize, the sooner you have compassion for what they're going through, the sooner you'll hear them go, oh, thank you. You know, thank you. What a relief. Because we've all been on the phone with customer service people and thanked them profusely, right? I mean, maybe it doesn't happen every time, but it happens intermittently. So the more that you're considerate, the more that you really listen, the more that you hear, not just listen, the more that you can reflect back what you heard them say, which is really cool. So let me just make sure I've understood, Mrs. Smith, that the technician from Cox was supposed to be there yesterday from 1 to 3. That's what we had confirmed with you. And I believe you're telling me that no one ever showed up. Is that correct? Now, you know the guy was there. You know that she didn't answer her doorbell, but we'll get to that later.
Great example. Now, when you suggest to transform the objections, part 5, I know that they have to return to part 1, self-empathy, before they try to calm the client down, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. When you're transforming objections, the only way that you can transform objections is by reselling or continuing to sell. Objections are obviously a block to closing the deal. And you can't threaten them, you can't push them, you can't prod them. It doesn't work that way, because if you do, you'll have problems down the road. The only way that you can really close a deal is to hear enough about your potential client or client's needs and give them enough information about how those needs will be met by this product or service. Because among the 1,000 benefits that your product or service has, those benefits are included. And you need some sort of third-party confirmation that that's true. You know, I have 60 pages of testimonials on my website. They're divided into different categories. You know, entrepreneurship and business, relationships, dating, marriage, reconciliation, whatever it is. And family, co-parenting. So all of the different areas of what I do, which is communication and support, are there for people to read, and I will, of course, just remind them. And you need to do the same thing, too. That's what, you know, social media is all about, so that you get testimonials, so you get people to praise you, so they're real people with photos and email addresses. And that's the key. That's what you want to do.